All right, well, welcome. How's our day going so far? Wednesday. All right.
How's your day going?
My day's going good. It's going good. You know, I had a fistful of M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, so I'm good there, and a Diet Coke, and I'm ready. I'm ready. You know, when in college, that was kind of like my reward. You know, do a little bit, and then I go hit the vending machine, which at that time would have been Dr. Pepper and regular M&Ms. But now that I'm older, Diet Coke and peanut M&Ms. I don't know what that means, but today is good. So just as a reminder, you know, this Friday is an advisory Friday. So you'll have an advisory lesson to kickstart your day, and then you'll have shortened classes because it's a Flex Friday. I will be having some live instruction going on this Friday, so anticipate tuning in, dialing in. All right, but I guess the Benny of this Friday is that it's a shorter Friday than normal. So there we go. Look at it that. All right. So if we look at our agenda for today, it is this. We'll be spotlighting again Black history in a moment. Want to take a look at just look back on a kind of debrief the neutrality to war, and then jump into the actual conflict itself by giving an overview of the war, because I feel like I just gotta throw a little bit of thoughts there about how this war is going to play out, and then our last summative for this trimester dealing with the human impact of war. So you're going to look at some experiences of different groups during this conflict. All right, so that's kind of like our goal here. And so looking at spotlighting on African American history here, or Black history, Julian Bond. And I had a moment where I could have met him, and I don't know what the heck was going on my senior year at the University of Minnesota that prevented me from meeting him. But it was a moment in time that I wish, you know, if I could get back into history time machine, I would like to go back and meet the guy. But Julian Bond, he's a civil rights activist. He had attended Morehouse College in Atlanta, which is a school, historically Black college, university, where he helped found a civil rights group and led a sit-in movement intended to desegregate Atlanta lunch counters. So he was inspired by those students who were trying to integrate the lunch counters in like Greensboro and Nashville. In 1960, he joined in creating the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which we'll call SNCC. Right, so this is going to be one of what we'll call the Power Five groups that make up the civil rights movement. We'll have the NAACP, we'll have CORE, we'll have the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we'll have the Urban League, and then we'll have SNCC. So that's the Power Five there. From 1960 to 63, Bond led student protests against segregation in public facilities and other Jim Crow laws of Georgia. So that is his focus. He will also be present at many of the big civil rights events as well. March Against Fear, the Selma March, the March on Washington. He'll be there as well. He'll be part of some of the freedom rides as well. So he is a civil rights activist. One thing, though, that he did is he did run for Georgia's legislature, and so, but he found that he's going to have to fight for his congressional seat. So in 65, he won the seat in Georgia state legislature, but the body refused to seat him because of his endorsement of SNCC's statement opposing U.S. involvement in Vietnam. All right, so this is also the time of the Vietnam War, very polarizing as well. And because of his views, the Georgia legislature says, no, you cannot sit in that seat. The voters in his district rejected him in a special election and a regular election in '66, but the legislature once again continued to bar him. So what do? They take it to the next level, and they go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, you got to give him his seat. And so he is sworn in 1967. So if we look at his accomplishments as a social justice crusader and organizations that he is a part of, he's a member of SNCC, and that was also an organization that John Lewis, a fellow legislator from Georgia, but more at the U.S. level. He's president. He was the president of Southern Poverty Law Center from '71 to '78, and what that organization was trying to do was really showcase hate crimes in the United States, especially in the South. It was, again, that Georgia legislature from '67 to '87, so 20 years in the great state of Georgia. And he was president of the NAACP from 1998 to 2010. So very active in the movement. He was also one who was able to really bring in more youth into this movement, so more at that grassroots level here. All right, I got a little video clip here on Julian Bond. There is a Julian Lennon.
I think the mood of violence, aggressive violence on behalf of the oppressor is expanding. He knows he can return to his old ways of viciousness and brutality and bloodletting, and that little or nothing will be done to him. Let them put away their race prejudice. Let them banish the idea that one class must rule over another. Let them recognize the fact that the rights of the humblest of citizens are as worthy of protection as the rights of the highest.
I believe gay rights are civil rights.
Does anyone have any thoughts about Julian Bond? And that was his voice, so that's what he sounded like. So, in one thing that, in the 1960s, when he was very active in the civil rights movement, it was also the Vietnam War, and he spoke out against it. He did look at the civil rights movement as almost like being a soldier in war, in terms of the type of conditions that they were dealing with. So they felt that they still were, he was, and others in the movement were serving their country just in a different way. Okay, so that's Julian Bond, and we'll definitely build on that when we do get to the civil rights movement. And again, my other thought here, I'm just going off on just keep adding stuff to my thoughts. He talked about the civil rights movement and other aspects of it. In the case in his speech, he talked about gay rights. We'll also see in the civil rights movement, there's going to be other splinter movements, splinter groups that pop off it. And so we will be focusing on that too in the next unit of study, which will be in trimester 3.1 and 3.2. Okay, so with that, in Schoology, and those at home will see that I put a link in the chat, and we're going to look at a Jamboard here. All right, and if you open that up, okay, it's going to look something like this. All right, and you can find that link again in Schoology, and it's just called Neutrality to War Review. So let's open that up here, and what I'm going to ask you to do is, let's see here. Tone that sucker down here. There we go. I want you to, you're looking at that one question that was about a turning point. So think about how you answered it. Where you think on this list is the turning point. And just jot it down somewhere around this Jamboard. All right? Which of the U.S. responses to fascist aggression marked the turning point in the nation moving from neutrality to war? All right, and so you might think it is U.S. declaring war on Japan, but maybe you might think it's much, or it could be earlier than 1941. That may be something else on that list. Maybe you think it could be the cash and carry, or you might think it's the Selective Training and Service Act with and the destroyer deal. The destroyer deal. That's going to give the United States access to some bases in the British Empire, or Congress passes the Lend-Lease Act. So just jot down what you think it is, okay? Ooh. So let's take a moment. Not asking you to explain, just put down on there a thought. All right, let's take about another minute here. We got about 16 taking care of that. Need a few more people. Be fantastic. Okay. So just a quick review, looking at that, looking at this Jamboard here, and just eyeballing it. I'm seeing that a lot of people are picking, going with the Lend-Lease Act. All right, and you know the Lend-Lease Act is we can look at that. It comes out in about 1940. All right, so about a year before we actually get into the war itself. And if we think about why is the Lend-Lease Act going to be very important for the United States to pass, in many ways we look at the Lend-Lease Act kind of like a New Deal type program for countries who are trying to hang on against the fascist powers. And so our thought was, boy, you know, if Great Britain and some of the others, and eventually the Lend-Lease Act is going to be used for like China and for the Soviet Union and other countries as well. We feel like we need to help them out in some case. Lend support, military support, lease out access to area, but also material as well. And this is an outright violation of our earlier neutrality acts. So you can say that we are now in a undeclared war. Now it's just a matter of time. All right. And the United States does appear that it is trying to work and find some time here, because earlier, you know, it had, because of the fall of France, we did do the selective service. So once again, we're going to go and create a draft, and this is still, it's a peacetime draft here as well. So these are, so again, any of these are anything that you pick really is a good option. Now, as long as you're able to back it up and explain ultimately the why. All right. Some might even look at like the cash and carry as beginning to move that turning point. Cash and carry, even though it was intended not to put us at harm's way, try to prevent what was happening in World War I that brought us in. But the cash and carry still is, we're going to be aiding the Allied powers who are going up against the fascists at that time. Big stuff. All right. Now, war is on us in 1941. And now the mad dash here is, for some, they got to go sign up. Got to go sign up and fight. Now, I had asked a few of you, you know, if you had some family members who were in this conflict, and about 16 million American young men are going to either volunteer or Uncle Sam's going to volunteer you, which means you're going to be drafted. And the type of army that we're going to have to put together requires the United States to draft. We are one of the few countries at that time that relied on a draft. Other countries had compulsory military service. Now, I got to ask the question for the young men. Do you have to sign up for selective service? Don't worry, I'm not connected with the United States military in any way. But I do work for the government. The school of government. Young men, do you have to register for a draft? Yeah, you do. You do. Turn 18, you gotta go register. I remember when I had to go register for the draft, thanks to the Soviets invading Afghanistan in 1979. As a result of that, the selective service was brought back. If I want to get financial assistance to go on to college, all right, so some people are going to fill out FAFSA and all that stuff. I had to demonstrate that I registered for the draft. That's the way the government was in some ways enticing I don't want to use the word kind of strong arm, but maybe, to ensure that I have registered and then I'll be eligible for any federal financial assistance and such like that. So that's part of it. Down the road, if I was going to like start collecting my Social Security or any federal benefits, they would look to see if I had registered for the draft, and if I did not, they could deny me those types of things. So, and if you don't register for the draft, there's always like 5 years in jail waiting for you and about $250,000 fine. So potential if they want to go after you, all that stuff. So by June of 1985, I had registered for the Selective Service, all that stuff. I still got my number. I still hang on to it. And if I got on the Selective Service site, I can find my number and I find all my information. The government still has it, all that. So there we go. So when you turn 18, Uncle Sam would like you. Back then, Uncle Sam wanted some GIs as well, because in this war, we're going to be called the GIs. Does anyone know what GI stands for? It is not sexy in a classy way. You think it's going to be some cool, just means government issued. You're a GI. In World War I, we were the doughboys. In World War II, we were the GIs. We were the GI Joes. Okay, there we go. Now, I've got a little video clip here, and it's 3 guys giving their viewpoint on why they joined. This conflict. And we're going to have about 16 million that are going to put on the uniform, right? Who want to be Captain America. Because
For this is what we are fighting. Freedom's oldest enemy. The passion of the few to rule the many. This isn't just a war. This is a common man's life and death struggle against those who would put him back into slavery.
Well, you know, we had lots of propaganda films showing us how bad the enemy was and how evil and so forth. We were all quite cynical about these. We thought these are training films. It's an awful lot of propaganda and baloney.
For the Nazi master race theory calls for the complete wiping out of so-called inferior races. And in village after village, local Judases point out loyal Polish neighbors.
We didn't believe in the brand of evil that they were propagandizing. We didn't think we were fighting to save the world, but we thought that, you know, it was our country against that country, and that country had been the aggressor, and the Japanese, their allies, had started us in it, and we had to win it. And it was that simple. We didn't realize till later how important it really was.
I was fairly close to being a pacifist. I believe that there is mostly negotiated solutions to most problems of this sort, but I couldn't fathom that there was ever a solution to the confrontation that Hitler was giving to us and the rest of the world. I felt that I belonged in the service because the threat, while it was directed at the entire rest of the world, was particularly directed at the origins that I came from. if I didn't know it at the particular moment I went in, 13 weeks later, after I had finished my basic training, I knew expertly how to kill. Kill with a bayonet, kill with a bullet, kill with your hands. Yes, I could kill.
I left Minneapolis for the service on a dank, wet, cold March Minneapolis evening. My father drove me to the station in the car that he almost never let me drive as a kid. Downtown, past all the places that had been the stations of my childhood and growing up, to the Rock Island Railroad. It was dark. The long platform was dark with hanging arc lights at distance, so that as you walked, it was dark light, dark light, dark light. And at the far end was a Navy yeoman with a clipboard and a gathering of young men or boys around him. And we stopped, and my father shook my hand. It seemed very strange to me that my father and I were on handshaking terms. Then he turned around and walked back toward the entrance. Dark light, dark light, dark light, and out into the street and was gone. And I turned to the yeoman and went up and said present when my name came up, and I was in the Navy.
All right. So any thoughts on any of those little clips there? I always get goosebumps with that last one, because that's that Minnesota connection, which I always try to get, is that Minnesota connection. He thought it was interesting. He said he thought it was interesting that he's on shaking hands now with his dad. Could that symbolize anything? It's no longer his little boy. You're a young man now. Off you go. 17, 18-year-old. I mean, think about right now, again, for some young men or just people in general, you're 17 or 18, off to war. The Department of Defense does say 17-year-olds can be in combat. So it's an extraordinary thing. All right, so the world changes it. The second guy, Leopold from Connecticut, and being a pacifist and then going to being this war. And he talked about, what Hitler was doing, Hitler and what Hitler meant. And, Leopold was also, if we want to look at it, if we want to categorize, he's an American Jew. And so for Jewish people, World War II is going to have some special meaning to it as well. And so, and we know by 1941 that there is some action going on about elimination or genocide. And the word itself, genocide, is being created, is being developed. Raphael Lemkin is the guy who's going to come up with the word about genocide, because there really wasn't a word like it in existence. But we do know by 1941, there have been acts of genocide going on and against specific people. All right, so think about that. All right, I just want to give an overview of the Second World War. I should have probably told you when you showed up today that maybe you got to get your historical seatbelt on. We're going to be in it for a ride here, man. We're going to be in a ride. Anything I do, I always throw the word historical in it because it sounds good. Get historical goosebumps, all that. Second World War. When does it start? When does the Second World War start? How about that? 1934.
Because that's when, I think that's around when Italy first launched their invasion of Ethiopia.
Okay.
I could be wrong on the year.
All right. And so that's an interesting way of looking at that start. But that would be just with Italy and not like, if we look at overall. But you can make a claim that when Italy takes out Ethiopia or Abyssinia, that's the start of a conflict, or when Nazi Germany invades Poland, and now it's game on, so 1939. And in the Pacific theater, you could say when Japan invades China in 37, it's game on. So it's a little gray. Sometimes we look at the European theater in 39. Sometimes the Pacific theater, we're going to say 37. We do know the end is 1945. Game over, 1945. All right. I do have a copy of these. It is very rare that I give notes in 11th grade. Very rare. Here's a moment. I'm just going to give an overview. I do have a copy of these that can be found in Schoology in presentation notes. But just a little overview here. Some of you know, when we talk about the Second World War and its nature and practice, this war is called a total war in many ways. So that means every resource is going to be used here. Industrial, human, capacity as well, technology, basically the power of the state, all of it's going to be used towards this war. This was a war between peoples and against peoples. And in this case, there was very difficult, or the lines were blurred between who was a soldier and who was a civilian. 2/3 of the casualties in this war are actually going to be civilians. Because they got caught up in the war or they became the target themselves. Atrocities were committed by both sides. Germany, of course, with the final solution. Allies with types of bombings that they did. And in the United States, one could look at our engagement with the Japanese internment. And Japanese internment is very interesting in that we intern Japanese Americans. Canada does not come clean as well. Canada did the same thing. And the Latin American countries, they shipped them to us. So we took care of people of Japanese descent that were living in places like Peru. They sent them to us. Weaponry grew more destructive, became a very applicable force. And you can say that the weapons did influence the outcome of this war, definitely. Allied and Axis tactics and strategies transformed the war as it progressed. They definitely did. How we fought in the Pacific theater was a lot different in some ways how we fought in the European North Africa theater, okay? The state of the powers, so we're talking about like United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union, Germany, Japan, all that stuff. In order for this type of war to be fought, the government is going to have to direct it. Just like they did in World War I, they're going to do it in World War II. The government's going to coordinate. And in this war, they will dictate how resources are going to be used and what kind of industries are going to get preference. Civilian participation on the home front is going to be critical. I'm going to step away from my camera here. For those of us at home, we know the war is going to exist, or it's going to impact us because they're going to have us ration our food. And every one of us, all right, every one of us is going to have a book. So if you're in a family of 4, there's going to be 4 of these books. If you're a family of 8, there's going to be 8 of these books. If you're single, there's a book. All that stuff. And if you go to the grocery store, you better have your book. You know, so they can take out a stamp. You're going to get some gas. You're going to have to do that. Forget about getting a new car. All right? New cars don't exist in the United States realistically during this war. There is a black market though, because you know Americans, we do not want to sometimes do without. So there is a black market out there. The government engage in market though, because you know Americans, we do not want to sometimes do without. So there is a black market out there. The government's also engaged in propaganda. For those in my classroom, along my wall here, back there, government is going to try to get us to demonize our enemy and get us to do the right thing. If you're going to go to work, you don't drive to work by yourself, because if you drive to work by yourself, that means you're driving to work with Hitler. That was the kind of thing. So you carpool. All that stuff. Loose lips, sink your ship. No gossip. No gossiping. All right, so sometimes you might hear that. Some might say, loose lips, sink your ship. And you go, man, that is so old school. Well, yeah, it is. That's World War I, World War II lingo there. We are fighting for national survival. All right, early on, in one of our earlier video clips, had also pointed that out as well. Early on, the Axis powers had success, and the thought about going up against it. And Charles Lindbergh yesterday actually talked about that. They were very successful early on because they were not initially opposed by two giant powers, the Soviet Union and the United States. Instead, Western powers appeased them. That activity that you did the past couple of days realistically defines appeasement, giving in to Axis aggression. Just give them what they want, and maybe that's it. You know, it's like when I go to the grocery store when my kids were really little, and they were, my son was always, we get by the Hot Wheels and all that stuff at the grocery store, and he would start acting up. What I do, I appease him. Here you go, have a Hot Wheel. Secretly, I also want to play with the Hot Wheel too, but it's like, here you go. And he knew, I'm just gonna, every time we go by the Hot Wheels, I'm gonna appease him. All right. Adolf Hitler knew every time he was asking for something, the West most likely was going to appease him. They seem to have a game plan. Germany, Lebensraum. Italy, a third Rome. Japan, co-prosperity sphere. They had a game plan. And they were war ready. By 1939, they're war ready. They got experience. All right, where us, the GIs, 16 million eventually in the uniform, we're kind of raw at first, but give us time. Effective use of their technology that they had, blitzkrieg, all that stuff, and psychologically, they seem to have the edge. However, over time, the Allied powers will have advantages. Axis forces were spread over too far, okay? Too far. And it's very hard for them to hold on to it. Great Britain and the Soviet Union were not defeated, and the Soviet Union's size in the United States industrial complex, we are the arsenal of democracy, right? You ever seen that movie Ford versus Ferrari? All right. I remember one scene in that movie where Ford is talking with Shelby and says, look at that plant. You know, this isn't the first time Ford has gone to war against Europe. Ford plants were kicking out airplanes, tanks. They were doing what they would say their part in the war effort. Grand Alliance, of course, you know, we had at least 15 some allied powers on our side here and communicated. And time, of course, is also going to be on the side as well. Italy, Japan, Germany, they could possibly fight a small, short war. But if this war drags out, it's going to be hard for them because the war is going to come to them. And it's every time a plane is destroyed, American plane is destroyed, you got about 10 sitting on the tarmac. And every time a German plane is destroyed, their stockpile goes down, 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 and they cannot replace it quick enough. Japan cannot quickly replace them enough. Right. So I mentioned that there are some different theaters, like in the European theater, and sometimes in this war, maybe in 10th grade, you talked about some of these battles. These are all very critical battles here, like Stalingrad and El Alamein. We look at them as turning points. Stalingrad, Soviets hold out the Germans and start moving in a eastward or westward direction. El Alamein, the African Corps of the German army, is knocked out in northern Africa. And so that's a turning point there. And of course, D-Day, Operation Overlord, is the big opening of the second front. So again, a lot of this represents manpower, technology, and time. And then the Battle of the Bulge is a little setback in the fall of Berlin in May 7th, 1945, represents the end of the war. The war is brought to the German capital. Now, I mentioned that this is kind of like total war in technology that is being used here. I do have a little quick video clip I'm gonna bring in, and it's called the Battle of Kwajalein. Viewer discretion is necessary here on this one, but it is going to give us a little sense of the type of fighting that was in the Pacific Theater here. So if you had a family member who had served in the Pacific Theater, this might.
Kwajalein was an interesting experience because I feel now that it was like I would see a movie documentary. I saw the attack by our fleet, our planes, dozens of battleships and destroyers pumping shell after shell. It seemed so overwhelming, the force that we applied to this tiny island, not more than maybe 2 miles each way. That was quite an overwhelming display of might. I saw the carnage and the complete devastation that I'd never seen before. It was a total carnage. There was nothing left standing. Everything was just concrete and bodies and dead palm trees. Everything was just shot to hell. There was nothing there. It was awful.
Okay, so you can see with Kwajalein, that's a perfect example of total war, but also mentality. The Japanese, did they surrender? Did you pick up on how many actually surrendered? About 230 out of 8,100, all right? So what we also see is in this conflict that there are people that are willing to ultimately die for the cause, even though the cause may look like it is a lost cause. We'll see that a lot with the Japanese, and we'll see that to some extent with Germany and Italy, and even see that spread into the frame of thinking for the civilians as well. Cannot live in a world without Adolf Hitler. Cannot live in a world where Japan isn't dominant. So you can see the technology here. One thing that, to me, that kind of spooks me a little bit with the Pacific Theater is some of the old documentaries I used to see. There'd be sharks swimming in the water too. And I'm like, oh, no way. How in the heck you can get off that landing craft, jump in the water, and get on the island, and there is sharks? No way. But that's what you're dealing with. All that stuff. The type of strategy. Does anyone know the type of strategy the Americans used in the Pacific Theater? There's a name for it.
Island.
Yes, it is island hopping. It is island hopping, or leapfrog. You know, I think of that video game leapfrogging, but it is island hopping. You're popping from one island to another because the goal is to get to Japan, or at least close enough to Japan in order to bomb Japan. The key in the Pacific Theater is to knock out Japanese naval power and air power. That's the key. Aircraft carriers and aircrafts are going to be the important here. So like the Battle of Midway, Coral Sea, Leyte Gulf, all of those are going to reduce the Imperial Navy's capacity to wage a war against the United States. We are going to be knocking out their ally or their aircraft carriers and a good chunk of their air power. So by the time after Okinawa and Iwo Jima has happened and bombers are showing up in Japan, they are not going to there's not going to be much resistance to them. So we're going to be able to attack the island of Japan. All right. And so then we also know with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs is going to knock out Japan. And so this is where technology may have a role in determining the outcome of the war. So Japan, we look sometimes at September of 1945 as VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day. And so the war is over in that regard. Okay, so a little bit of an overview of that. But now, does anyone have any follow-ups, any questions or things that need to be clarified? So what I need you to do is let's go to Schoology. And so you will see that I have opened up the assignment, Human Impact of War. All right, and it's going to be due Monday, March 1st. And it's going to look something like this. All right. Okay. And so we're looking at the human side of the war. Gave you a very quick overview of the Second World War. Now we want to see how does it impact certain individuals. All right. And we're looking at conscientious objectors, Japanese Americans, African Americans, Native Americans, Latinx, and women is what we're looking at here. So you can work with a historical buddy, and it has to be in my class. All right, historical buddy, or you can do the solo, and you can choose 2 of the groups from the giant chart that I just showed you. Okay, and when we think of conscientious objectors, what's that mean? Conscientious objectors. Do we know what a conscientious objector is? Someone who opposes war. They have a religious or moral reason why they oppose the war. Doesn't mean you're going to get out of wearing a uniform. It may, though, prevent you from being in combat. You might have some other roles. There was a movie that came out in 2016 called Hacksaw Ridge. And the main character in it was a conscientious objector. They wanted to spotlight what conscientious objectors had done during the war. Some of them did go to prison. Others, though, found other roles in the military. All right, so you need to pick 2 of your choice. I'm not going to tell you which 2. Because it's up to you. It's up to you. So if you're interested in the conscientious objectors, do that. And if you're interested in Native Americans, you go ahead and do that as well. But you have 4 choices on how to complete this project, though. And it has to be either on paper or electronically. All right, and if you do it on paper and you're not in my class, or you don't come either on the AB day, you just got to take pictures of it and stuff like that. So create a child's story book. Target audience is 9 to 10 years old, must include visuals. All right, and so if you are focusing on Japanese Americans and African Americans, we're looking for, in this child story book, you're going to reference Japanese Americans and African Americans. All right, whatever your is. Create honorary plaques along with acceptance speeches. All right, create a scrapbook. A scrapbook cannot be created in Google Slides, but there are applications out there that you can, like Book Creator, or in Google Docs, you could probably create a scrapbook. All right. Or create an interview with a hero with questions and responses, Q&A with that. All right. And so a hero, again, if you pick Japanese Americans and African Americans, interview with a hero who maybe served in a Nisei unit during this war, and for African Americans, perhaps maybe someone who served in the armed forces as well, or someone at home. And again, with Japanese Americans as well, it could be also with as an internee as well. Whichever project you choose, the following information is required for each of the groups, though. You know, their role in the war and on the home front. Explanation of their experiences in the war and on the home front. So what's it going to be like for them? Examples of specific person or group involved in the war on the home front. Include at least 2 peeps. Visuals of individuals and groups. These can be hand-drawn or electronic. World War II is a highly documented war, just like World War I was as well. Right? Explanation of the impact of the war on this group. What changed? For some of them, their status in society may change, or it might kickstart something, or it was a dial back. Explanation of the impact this group had on World War II. What was their biggest contribution? The biggest contribution here. And lastly, of course, you know, we've got the BHQ. In what ways can we use our past history to gain a greater understanding of the present? So again, we're trying to make connections. What is it about World War II that is still very, very applicable today, or just in general about these big moments in history? How does it impact us today? All right, this will be due Monday. So that means we'll have time in class on Thursday, Friday, and Monday to work on it. Today I took up a good chunk of it. Okay. So first, any questions about this? So this is our second summative, and that'll be our last summative. So we only have 2 summatives this trimester. All right, so it's important that you have them both. All right. No questions or concerns? Probably a lot of concerns. All right. So those at home, if you have no questions or concerns, you can either stay on or exit and have a great day. Those here, get a good head start. Maybe communicate with those who you think you might want to work with.